Are you good to go, Jonas? You got any questions or anything before we start?
I'm good to go.
Okay, sweet.
I'm ready.
All right.
Easy. That was easier than usual.
Yeah. Usually there's a lot of panicking at this point. The following is a conversation with a man named Jonas, the managing director and co-founder of Askui.
So we are based in Karlsruhe, also studied here industrial engineering, and we incorporated in 2021. I met my co-founder 2 years earlier, also at the university, and we do UI automation. So basically every kind of automation activity on user interfaces.
Askui is a web platform that automates UI testing and makes sure that your platform works from end to end.
Yeah, check us out on askui.com and sign up for our new tool.
We talked to Jonas about how the company got started, what testing actually is, why automated testing is better than manual testing, what the tipping point is to switch from one process to the other, and crucially for all those founders out there, what lessons he learnt along the way. Some good tidbits in there. The podcast is brought to you by Codesphere. You can find out more at codesphere.com. And subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts from. Enjoy the show.
Yeah. Where have you just been, by the way, Jonas? Let's start there. Where were you? Work related?
Yeah, actually work related. So there's the South by Southwest. It's a conference in Austin in Texas.
Yeah.
It's a huge conference actually about tech and all kind of music festival stuff going on there. So we were there for 10 days with the German delegation actually, presenting our startup. And it was a crazy experience, man. So a lot of crazy dudes running around, a lot of metaverse, Web3 topics, all that kind of stuff. But it was super cool, but also super exhausting.
Was it useful for you guys?
I don't know yet. So it's always after conference, you just start sorting your contact cards and all the stuff you get and to check on them, and you write follow-up emails. So I cannot tell right now, but I think so, yes. Mostly because of internationalization. So we might have an entry point into the US market now, so which is quite nice.
Excellent news. Man, these conferences are crazy events. Love them.
The thing that I saw from South by Southwest this year was that drone QR code that somebody did. Did you see that? Did you see that, Wes?
Yeah, I've heard about it as well. And I actually knew who made it, but I didn't see it. Who was it? I cannot remember right now, but everyone was talking about it. I didn't.
So there was I think they might have done it for a movie. I think they might have done it for Batman.
Right. A whole swarm of drones created QR code in the sky, and you could scan it.
You could scan it from
my
your phone.
phone struggles to pick them up in restaurants, so there's no way it would do it in the sky. I'd be standing there like a dad. Looking for UFOs. What did you do before you started the Askui?
So I went straight after my studies into the company founding process, actually. So I studied industrial engineering and management. And besides my full-time studies, I was working at ETK Engineering. It's company, I think related to Bosch right now. And I did a bit of software development there. Nice. Yeah, that's basically my background.
Did you study the engineering that you were doing? Was that software engineering? Or was that engineering, real life engineering?
So it's industrial engineering is everything at once. You have this kind of study going on where you have computer science, real life engineering. You have economics a lot. Okay. Especially I did a lot of economics and computer science, which also led to the founding of this company, basically.
Okay. You're the third person that we spoke to on the podcast so far, who's done and has a engineering background outside of software, so it's becoming a bit of a theme so far. people that
I think it's similar like wheelhouses, like it's problem solving mechanically or digitally.
But also by the sounds of things in Germany, that the course itself is also lended quite strongly towards becoming a founder if it's got like a financial element and all that kind of economics and stuff as well.
Yeah, there's actually a saying going on at our university. As an industrial engineer, you either found a company or you become a consultant. That's basically how it is.
Yeah, that's a good one. Those who can't teach. All right. Before we get too far into what Askui does, then let's step back a little and tell us, what is UI automation?
Yeah, so maybe let's start like, what is the user interface first? Like,
let's go there. Yeah. Even better.
Because so user interface is basically like the interface between the user and the computer. So everyone knows the classical graphical user interface, what I'm also talking about all the time. So basically the thing you're all looking when you're opening the laptop or like looking at your phone, like all the kind of buttons, text fields, web pages and stuff like that.
Can I just interrupt you there, because that has got the best. That's my favorite acronym, I think, in GUI. I was going
to ask if you're a GUI or GUI person. Because some people say GUI and I like saying GUI. So
it's all, and also related is WYSIWYG as well. What you see is what you get. That's also a great acronym in the world of user interface. Right. But yeah, GUI is great. I love that. Sorry, I had to just interject.
Yeah, sure. Like I would say GUI as well. So as a German, I think you always say GUI.
Yeah, continue the movement. GUI's for life.
Yeah. So basically, UI automation is if you want to automate things on a GUI. For example, if you have like a checkout process on a retail site or e-commerce page or like a web page, and you want to automate the checkout process to see if it's always like working correctly, you specify a certain kind of set of actions. So like log in, click on some kind of element, put it in, or like some kind of product, put it in the cart, go to checkout, and then look if it's like correctly sold or whatever. And you just specify those steps, and based on those steps, the actions get automated or automatically like repeated. And that is basically what UI automation is about.
Okay, so it sounds there like it's the first thing that jumps to my head is a perfect way to test like simple process through your website. Let's say the checkout example you did, and it's just the expected user journey, and does every click work on the way through?
Yeah, exactly. So also UI automation is like the most expensive test automation out there. So you would only test for happy paths, they're so called. So the most relevant like click paths or user journey throughout the application, you would automate on them on the user interface level. And basically that's it. Yeah.
Okay, so you're testing like the actual journey, the interface itself. So from like the person landing on the page right through to like a purchase, as opposed to like, is this how good is this journey? Is it from a design point of view as well, or is it purely from just like, does this work?
You can do both. There's like also visual testing, which is like a kind of another thing which you can do. But from our standpoint, it's like UI automation is typically are only functional. So you need this because like if you change the software a lot, like if you put a lot of updates, you don't know if they interfere with like the existing software. So you push an update and then sometimes it happens that some old stuff is breaking. And to make sure that your happy paths are not breaking on every update, you always test like on every new update the existing workflows, basically.
I guess that's so important as well. If you're using APIs as well, like for the endpoints and the data. Like if your interface, then say you've got a list of I don't know, ice creams, and each one goes to a different ice cream shop when you go to click, because that the API might change, or the actual endpoint or the data might update or something like that. So I guess that in those examples, it's also very useful.
Yeah, it is. So there's also like, I don't know, there's the testing pyramid. So at the bottom, there's the unit tests, like you test like components, like each on their own. And then you have like fewer integration tests, which you would refer to API tests. And then at the top, like the least amount of tests, you have like the UI. And the UI test is like a complete end-to-end test. So you don't mock like any API calls or something. And you just test the complete workflow, like in a black box approach, typically.
So why would I need UI testing as opposed to just manual testing? What's the advantage of automated UI testing? Sorry.
Yeah, so basically it's too expensive or too slow in today's world to do it manual. So if you're releasing like every few hours, or like, I don't know, like if you push like updates a lot of time, and on each update you have to set a manual tester there, and like he has to click through all of the pages, which still happens, but basically you want to automate this so you can release faster.
What's like the complexity scope on this? I'm wondering, because we use an example then of a very simple process. Can I get from product to cart? That's very simple, maybe 3 or 4 clicks, 2 clicks if you're doing it well. But on what kind of scale are some of your users using it to test? Is it just lots and lots of very simple tests, or is there some very huge complex steps it goes through?
So normally, like most of them, the best way to do is like just have a lot of simple ways to automate like tests. So like a simple short ones, because if one breaks, you know exactly where it breaks, and you want to make them like, you always set like a entry point, which is typically a URL. And then you have like some kind of actions, which consists like, I think most of our users do like 20 to 30 test steps. Like one test step is one instruction on the UI. Until they validate with some kind of certain thing. So a lot of things is like, go to this kind of URL, click on this button, and then check if this text appears, for example. And then you write lots of those and not so much complex ones in the length.
Where does it sit as a product? Is it like, is it part of like the, when you push to Git or something, is it part of the coding process, or is it like a separate tool?
Yeah, so it's like integrated in your CI pipeline, basically.
Okay.
So
cool.
You would write it, and then if you deploy or build the tool, like you run the UI test like you run the UI test and then get feedback on it, and if they pass, like it goes to production.
Was there like a kind of eureka moment for you when you were doing your studies, when you came up with this? Was it like, were you doing something that gave you the idea, or was it just like you were doing loads of tedious testing, or like what was the thought of what made you start the company?
So the idea, actually, I have to give the credits to my co-founder, Dominic.
Shout out to Dominic.
Shout out to Dominic. Should have had him on the interview.
That's why the shutters are down, keeping him out.
Yeah, so he was testing. He was not testing. He was a developer at Siemens, and they tried to automate a lot of tests, and they failed miserably. So he had the idea to do it easier, and he pitched the idea to me, and I was hooked, and then we got started, I guess.
Nice.
Okay, so there's like a real world application behind it, like in a big company.
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
Okay.
So from a startup perspective, for all of our founders or even startups out there listening, why is automated testing specifically good for them? I mean, it feels to me like the obvious answer is because then they can just iterate quickly, they can get lots of deployments out the door and then test it all and make sure everything's working. But is there more of like a long-term reason to be automating UI testing?
Yeah, it all comes down to money, I guess. So there's a famous statistic which describes like how expensive a bug is and like at which point of the development process is it found. And if you find a bug in production, it's like super expensive, like, which makes sense. If you have like a bug on your e-commerce website up for like 12 hours and nobody notices, and like you cannot purchase stuff, you lose a lot of money. And this, like, you want to avoid this at all costs.
It's a bit of a dilemma, though, isn't it, for startups out there? Because obviously the testing is expensive and time consuming, but at the same time, it's super necessary.
Yeah, it is. And I actually think that startups, like at the very early stage, should not care too much about software testing, actually, because like they iterate so much. It rather makes sense if you have, like, if you know what you're building and you won't change it a lot. So you can set up a proper test environment and you have like a lot of users running on them. But if you're just like starting out and trying out new things, I think it doesn't make sense to too much bother about like test automation in the like.
Well, we actually spoke to our guest a few weeks ago, Roman. He was explaining that testing is really just depends on how confident you are on the longevity of that piece of that code or that feature. So if you know you're just getting things out the door, you shouldn't waste too much time on it. But if something's planned to stay for a long time, like a core feature, then obviously testing is vital.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
And I guess as well, it's all about like the amount of traffic you're going to see as well. If it's just like a few people buying one or two very expensive things, then it's not so bad. But if it's like lots and lots of people going through, like the data points are also important.
Yeah, so I don't know, like at the beginning of a startup, you just want to try out a lot of things, like, and you change like your code like all the time. For example, like get a few landing pages out there, like, or like build like a small product, get a few users on it. So, and if it breaks, it doesn't matter at all. So if you have like a lot of revenue going through that, you need the testing.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah,
it was a little bit like what Michał was saying about the difference between
previous guests. For those who don't know,
for those that haven't listened all the way through, which is a terrible tragedy if you haven't listened.
You can't assume every listener's listened to the other all it.
I am going to assume that everybody's listened to every episode.
First name basis with all of our guests. So in a few weeks, we're like, I remember what Jonas said, and everyone.
Yeah, exactly. And it'd be a shame for those people who haven't listened to the episode.
Right.
But Michał, previous guest, was saying that there's a difference between like making mistakes to learn from them, and then there's like costly ones that actually get to the production point. It's like the difference between a mistake and an error, I guess. So I guess this completely sits in that whole area of wanting to just sort of make changes fast and learn from the mistakes that you make, but then also you're not actually them getting all the way to production and being costly to your business.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Askui then directly. So how specifically does Askui provide UI testing automation? What's the actual product look like?
Yeah, so that's like actually really interesting because like we went through a lot of iterations of products. So we started as a no-code automation tool, which was mid last year, and we had a lot of users on the product. And from that, we learned that actually we should build a developer tool. And maybe I have to explain why this makes sense. So what we do is basically you give us a screenshot, and we have a deep learning model trained on understanding the UI elements on it. So you can envision it like. I'm sure you all know like the autonomous driving with the bounding boxes around like pedestrians and stop signs and stuff like that.
Yep.
It's the same kind of tech for user interfaces. So you give us a screenshot or like a video of like a UI, and we can label you what kind of element is where. And we use that kind of automation information for automation. So you tell us click on the login button in the top right corner. So we take a screenshot, look if there's a login button in the top right corner, move the mouse to the position and click on it. Mm-hmm. And this differs mainly from like Selenium and like other projects. Yeah.
So this is machine learning, right? You've got
yeah.
Well, yeah, it's not Mechanical Turk the whole way through.
Yeah.
But the first version that you had was like no code. It was just like a what did you use to build that? That's nuts that it was.
It was a no-code test automation tool. So we built it with code, but
from the user side.
From the user side, it was a no-code tool.
Okay, got it. I was going to say like there's some like all-powerful no-code tool that's just like I can do machine learning driven user interface testing. That'd be crazy.
All right. So how did let's have a little talk about the journey so far then. So we spoke about what UI automation testing is and how Askui does it. But let's just talk about your journey as a co-founder. How's it been so far? A lot of our listeners out there are ideally founders or co-founders themselves. Have you got any top tips of what not to do from your last few years?
Oh yeah, I think. So we went into like the mistake. Like a lot of first-time founders actually make this mistake, I think. So we did a lot of mistakes with fundraising in the beginning, and we had like really luck that we like managed to get out of them all really good. So. When we started first fundraising, I think it was mid last year, we had some horrible deals on the table, and we were like, everyone is talking to us. Okay, so let's do this great, and like they were also nice, and like the investors, like you want to, like they all tell you what to do and stuff like that. But in the end, it's like listen to other founders. If they give you like a tip, don't do this deal. And they have experience in fundraising. I think you should listen to them as well. Like,
out of interest as well.
That's a big one, yeah.
Because I'm really fascinated by this whole question of like when you think, okay, I've got to raise funds to actually do this before you get customers. Was that a big decision for you, or was it just like there's no way we can do this without funding? You just need the funding to grow fast?
Yeah, so we had a discussion internally if we want to bootstrap or not. But like we all started, like we started with a governmental funding, like the Exist founding program, which is really nice, which secures funding like for no equity for 1 year. And we thought we might get like positive revenue within this year, but during this year we we just said to ourselves, like, it doesn't make sense to go with bootstrap. It just takes too long. Like we want to grow like really large. We want to be building like the next unicorn. So if you want to do that, you need like funds for that. So
I just saw that Sequoia, actually, that massive VC fund in the US has just started. They've just opened a European like entity. They're going to start supporting European companies now. Anybody that's listening out there is definitely worth checking out because they are pretty good at funding stuff. That's how much I know about funding. It's just, you ask them and they give you the money, right?
Did you implement a lot of automation testing when building Askui?
In the beginning, we did not. No.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, so that's what I meant. Like, if you are just trying out like with a lot of products, you don't want to like spend too much time on automation testing. But we did later. Like right now, we have tested so much, and we know like if we pitch this to a customer, they will pay for it or they will buy it. And at this stage, like we know that our software won't change that much in like from the certain perspective. And now we have integrated like all levels of the pyramid completely.
What is it you think that other startups should do to make sure their testing is more effective? Obviously, I'm sure your answer now will be use Askui to automate it. But
I wouldn't say so, actually. It depends. There are a lot of good actually no-code tools which you can just simply record your tests in the beginning, and they make sense. So our tool has like more of a dedicated use case to like platform independent automation. So we do like web automation and native mobile automation and desktop automation all in one tool, which is because we use this kind of technology and we're not interfering with like applications. But if you're just building like a web-based application, you're good to go with like a no-code recorder for your most important click paths in the beginning, and then switch to like more profound automation tools later on.
Give us a little bit more detail on that. Is that like kind of like that Google tool Puppeteer or something that just kind of goes through and tests it over and over again, or what would that be?
Yeah, so you can use, if you want to go more onto the code side, you can use Puppeteer, of course, or Tycho. Tycho is really nice. They have an awesome recorder, but a small tool. And there's like Cypress, Selenium, which you can use. But there are also like a lot of no-code tools, I think. I'm not sure if there are any free ones, actually. They all cost money. But I think like I would recommend Tycho, actually. I think this is the best
okay.
Tycho, yeah.
And what's the tipping point? What's the point where you're like, okay, now we need to do this in a different way because the platform's changing a lot, or the traffic's increasing, or what would you say?
I think the tipping point was when we figured out what our customers actually want. So, and we wouldn't like cut different kind of features. So it's like we were trying out so much in the beginning, and like we put like a whole platform, like our no-code automation tool was built, and we just threw it away basically right now. So it's like on ice. So tipping point was actually when we really got traffic on our tool. Yeah.
Okay. So that basically the no-code option just couldn't keep up, and you needed something that was part of your CI process that would just take over.
Yeah. No-code is like hard to maintain in the long run, at least for now. So like it's very easy to set up. The first kind of test you have like in a few minutes, you have like your basic test set up, and which is fine for like a small application. But if you like build the application throughout and you have to add tests and you have to maintain them a lot, I think no-code is really not that great in maintainability.
So I think that kind of like whole concept, especially in a startup of the tipping points, is really interesting because generally startups run so lean that it's really hard to identify the tipping points. And sometimes because the process is just so embedded in like the few people that are doing it, the process. So you're like, oh God, we're going to have to move on to a new tool. So yeah, it's interesting to hear your kind of opinion of that, like the, where you get to before you're like, okay, now we have to switch over, because I think that's really useful advice because, you don't really know when to sort of start and stop your different processes.
Yeah.
What do you think the future of automated UI testing is going to look like 20 years from now? Do you think it will just be like me built in on the dev side? So when you write some code, it will just, I don't know. What do you
If
think?
I would know that, I don't know. So I have like some thoughts about it. There are actually like two major directions, like which is the market is developing in. Like one is developer tools, and the other one is actually no-code automation tools. We build both, and we think as of right now, like the developer tools make more sense. But if no-code gets better and better, I think it could be that in the future there will be a lot of use cases for no-code automation as well. But in general, you also have to look at like different kind of use cases, because like user interface testing, user interfaces will change as well. Like we are starting to use virtual reality, augmented reality, stuff like that. The metaverse, Web3, all that kind of stuff needs to be tested as well. And there's like not many companies looking into that space as well, because like it's really hard. So let's see how this will work out.
I haven't even made the checkout process yet, let alone start testing it.